Thank you so much, Vincent, and your team for this great work and for naming it Race to the Bottom. Is it Race to the Bottom? Yeah, Race to the Bottom. Yeah, that gives a clear picture of what is happening on the ground. And thank you, STEM, and your team at the Uni Global. Yeah, because there is no representation, there is no human rights without representation. And in part of your report, you talked of around 20 million people working in the private security. Possibly you would have made it 200 million instead of 20 million. Yeah, because based on the baseline that we did in Kenya some few years ago, Kenya alone as a country, we have around 1.2 million people working in the private security industry. Around 800,000 formally employed by private security companies. And we have like 500,000 people doing private security work individually. They are not employed by anybody. You can just hire Caleb to come and guard your home. So if you are developing regulatory framework, you should be able to locate all this. For instance, Kenya, we have a new law, a Private Security Regulation Act that was passed in 2016. Which creates the authority that needs to certify everybody doing private security work, whether you are employed by a company or doing it at individual level. So there must be very clear framework for engagement for all these actors. But how can that be implemented when sometimes some of our regulatory authorities are fairly weak? And this comes with working conditions and compliance with the law. How do companies comply with the developed laws? Or how do company complies in countries where there is absence of particular law that regulates the private security industry? Yeah, because like in our region, she comes from Uganda. I know they are yet to develop a particular law of private security industry where you could just open a company just the way you can register any other company and walk out with certificate and recruit guards. But in Kenya, we are privileged that we now have a particular law, Private Security Regulation Act, that was intended to professionalize the sector. But now, what could be the capacity of the regulator itself to do the work? Because possibly the law was created when there are over 2,000 companies working in the country. So it means now you want to develop regulations from behind us to come forward, where most of the companies do not comply with the law. And I know one of his friends, who the Secretary General of Kenya National Private Security Workers Union, is also a very good friend of mine. With 100,000, average of 100,000 private security workers registered by the union, it means that could be just 10% of people working in the private security that are unionized. Where are the rest? So who can stand in for them when there is violation? I'm saying this because our baseline survey, which I think we shared with the secretary some few years ago, showed that it was almost a criminal offense to join a union if you're working in the private security sector. Because some of the companies, there are few companies that allow workers to be unionized, but majority do not want that. So we have like 500, 600, 700,000 people who are formally employed by companies, but are not members of the union, because when the company owners realize that you join the union, you will be sacked, you will be dismissed from the job. However small the pay is, but it still keeps somebody from living one day at a time. You talked of $60 payment in Mozambique. I know in Kenya there are companies that pay people even $30 per month. So you ask yourself, $30, how will you live on such a pay? And what can be done at the global level? What can be done at the regional level to make companies also give a pay that can keep somebody alive plus the family? But now, what are the economic realities in some of the countries also that can support such pay? We we have interacted with our union in Kenya. You realize that some companies contracted by the government of Kenya, which have developed minimum pay, but the government itself does not pay that minimum pay. So if the government does not pay the company, how will that company also comply? These are some of the human rights issues that we must focus on. Then internally, and this is why I'm always happy about what ICoCA does on grievance mechanism, and for members, company members that belongs to ICoCA, to develop internal mechanism for complaints. Yeah, because we know when there are violations, even inside the companies themselves. And this in particular with the ladies working in the private security. When we were doing our baseline survey, we interviewed several of them. Some are sexually abused by their supervisors inside the companies. So sometimes if the company does not have strong internal grievance or complaints mechanism, where will that lady report? Sometimes if you don't comply, if you don't respond to the demand of the supervisors, sometimes you are posted in a very risky or hostile area. You are underpaid and sometimes you are posted 17 kilometers away from your home. How will you get to your place of work? You have to report there by 6 a.m. in the morning. Nairobi, sometimes very risky, or Mombasa, or in some of the places. How will that lady get to work? They get raped sometimes on the way because she must leave her house at 4 a.m. in the morning to walk because she cannot afford to board a vehicle. So if we talk of human rights and compliance, yes, there are certain things, chapters written in the Act, but who obeys them based on those realities? Because you abandon this work tomorrow, you are jobless. You are being underpaid, but if you abandon the work tomorrow, you might not have even money for milk for your kid. So as we talk about human compliance, how do we deal with this? The issue of equipment, like warm clothing, sometimes when guards work at night, there are companies that do not provide even proper clothing for the staff. It means that person is exposed to a lot of health risks. Imagine the cold. It's 2 a.m. in the morning and you don't have proper clothing and you have to wake up every day to do that work. How will it work? You are exposed to a lot of serious things. Then our law does not allow private security guards to use firearms or to carry firearms. But the crime in some of our regions like Kenya, we are bordered with a lot of war-torn countries. Somalia, South Sudan, Ethiopia. Uganda for a long time had instability. So a lot of illegal firearms flow into Kenya that are used in crime. But the law does not allow the private security guards to use firearms. A lot of guards have lost their lives because you can't fight criminals. Sometimes you don't fight them. Your employer and the client accuse you of collaboration or colluding with criminals. So it's about now your life, and here's the job you have to protect. If you talk of human rights and compliance, what do we do? This is one of the areas that we need to focus as a global community, not only ICoCA, not only UniGlobal, but as a global community. How do we respond to some of these things? Then you talked about statutory deductions. There are deductions done by the companies that are not remitted to the government, the taxes. Like in Kenya, the medical insurance cover. We have the National Hospital Insurance Scheme. The money is deducted, but it's not remitted by the companies. So sometimes you feel sick, you try to use your card, you realize that your card had been disabled by the government because you have not been paying and you have been deducted every month. So who is there to do that? This is where the strong regulatory framework is also needed to help the companies do or comply with the law. So there's quite a lot of challenges in terms of human rights. Then, and I think this is very good, UniGlobal, I think we need also strengthen capacities of the unions. Yeah, because the pool, the team looking upon the union is so big But in terms of internal capacities of some of our unions, I've not only worked with the union for private security, also other unions. There is still some serious capacity that is required, and that's why we come in as civil society to support the work on proper governance, even in the private security industry. During the COVID period, there was a challenge when private security were declared by the government as essential service providers. So imagine the private security guards are exposed now to go COVID because they interact with a lot of people, and then you don't have proper medical cover. Sometimes the police also end up arresting private security guards because they are found out working at wrong hours. Wrong hours because the government created curfew when people are not supposed to work. A private security dog will not fly because it's not a bird. He will have to walk to work. So some of them ended up being taken in by the police only to be released later on. So there's quite a lot of challenges regarding this sector, and it can create a massive economic contribution to the global economy. So I know I can talk a lot, but let me leave it at that, so that my colleague Charlie can also make an input from the industry, and I know we will be able to respond to some of the questions. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen.